This program has been made possible by the friends and partners of Joyce Meyer Ministries.
In many ways, it has felt like my life was ruined by Matthew's death. But God is not helpless in those ruins. He is still working out his plan of love. He is a rebuilder. He is a restorer. And today, 5.5 years after Matthew died, I can truthfully say I am more a person of hope than I ever have been before.
Has someone that you loved committed suicide? If so, please stay with us. This show will be important for you. If not, you may be thinking, I don't need to watch this program, but unfortunately, someone you care about could be struggling with suicidal thoughts, and you don't know it's happening. Well, today we're talking about recognizing the signs and overcoming the pain of a loved one taking their life. My guest today, Kay Warren, will talk about dealing with the loss of her son. If you're struggling with suicidal thoughts or feeling overwhelmed by your circumstances, take a look at this. Everybody shout out real loud, God loves me. God loves me. Don't ever let anything separate you from the love of God. And when you're going through difficulties, don't ever say, well, God, don't you love me? And sometimes we tend to feel like that. Well, don't you love me? If you loved me, you wouldn't be letting me go through this. But we have to remember what he let his own son go through. And he had a purpose. Even as it is written, for your sake, we are put to death all the day long. We are regarded and counted as sheep for the slaughter. It's probably interesting the way some people look at our situations and what they think about us. Yeah, well, you're a Christian and look at what you're going through. But listen to this, right in the middle of all of these things, we are more than conquerors. What does it mean to be more than a conqueror? I think it means that you know in your heart, you have a relationship with God, and you know in your heart that you have won the battle before the battle ever even starts. And so it puts us in a position where we don't have to be afraid of trouble. Isn't that good news? I don't have to every time something happens that I don't think I'm gonna like. I can trust God and just hold my head up high and go through. For I am persuaded beyond doubt, I am sure that neither death, nor life, nor angels, nor principalities, nor things impending and threatening, nor things to come, nor powers, nor height, nor depth, nor anything else in all creation will ever be able to separate us from the love of God which is found in Christ Jesus. Everybody shout out again, God loves me, God loves me. And I am more than a conqueror. It's so wonderful to know that we have the victory. You know, as I said, I've been through a lot of difficult things in my life, and just because I know that there are people here tonight that are going through difficulties, I want to tell you that it's not how you begin that's nearly as important as it is how you finish. And the fact that you didn't get a good beginning in life doesn't mean that you can't have a great finish and a great ending. And if you trust God, every bad thing that's happened to you, he'll use it to make you stronger, and he'll actually use it not only for your benefit, but for the benefit of other people. But I tell you what, our troubles are not God's fault, but he is the answer to all of our problems. And if you will follow him, walk in his will and walk in his word, God will bring you out of the messes that you are in, and he will set you in a high place and bless your life and do amazing things for you, with you, and through you. Come on. So whoever you are tonight, whether you're here in this building or maybe you're watching by TV and you're just kind of at your lowest point, you just don't know what you're gonna do, you just feel like you're gonna quit and give up, I want you to know that God sees you, he has his eye on you, and he has a plan in place for your deliverance. And all you need to do is keep putting one foot in front of the other and just simply make your mind up, I will not quit, I will not give up. Amen? Well, suicide is something that we should not ignore. And if you're struggling with suicidal thoughts, don't be ashamed to ask for help. God does have a purpose and a plan for your life. My guest today, Kay Warren, experienced the agony of losing her son to suicide and is passionate about helping others through that pain. Well, Kay, thanks again for being with us. And I have something specific I'd like to start with. And that's how different people grieve. Like, did this affect you and Rick differently?
Great question. Yeah, great question. And people ask us that all the time. Just in general, I don't think we as believers know what to do with grief. What we end up doing is trying to minimize each other's grief. And we use things like, well, you know what, God must have wanted them more than he wanted him here.
Or he's in a better place.
Or he's in a better place. Or people will say things like, you know, they told my friend who lost her child at 6, well, you can have more children. At least you can get married again.
Right.
And so anytime we use the word "at least" in front of something, we're trying to minimize somebody's grief and their pain, and it's to make us comfortable. So if, you know, one of your listeners might be saying, well, I don't know what to say to people when they've lost somebody. You don't have to have a great speech. You don't have to have some great words. You can say something as simple as, I am so sorry for your loss. And that covers it. One of the things that I love about my husband, I mean, if I never loved him before, and I did, but if I didn't, I will always be so grateful that he made a decision to share his grief with me, to not carry it just on his own, to enter into my grief, that we would go through it together. And by that, I mean, not that we had to feel the exact thing at the same exact moment, but if I walk into the kitchen and he is sobbing, you know, there are some days, honestly, my first reaction is, oh, I'm tired. I don't have the energy to, you know, comfort you, but okay. And I just kind of put that aside. I walk over, I put my arms around him, I hold him, don't have to say anything. Same, I can be the one who's having the really rough day. He walks in, he doesn't go, you know, kind of, when are you gonna get, you know, whatever. It's like he just walks over, puts his arms around me and holds me.
That's so good.
And I think that because we have chosen to grieve together, that we are as close as we are. We're even closer, you know, now than we even were before. But one of the analogies that I use of like how families grieve differently, it just, imagine you're taking a bus trip and you're seated in this big bus, and then you get to the destination and you start talking to each other saying, hey, did you see that mountain on the right side of the road? And one of the other people in the bus goes, no, I didn't see that. And you're like, how could you miss that? It was huge. Or somebody else says, did you see that river? And you're like, I didn't see it. It all depends on where you were seated in the bus.
Right.
You were going to the same place, but it depends on where you were. So in a family, it depends on your relationship to the person who died. It depends on where you were seated, if you will, in the bus. So what that means is we give each other grace.
Right.
I don't expect my kids to grieve the way I grieve. I'm a parent.
Right.
I have a parent's grief. They have siblings' grief. It's different.
Yeah.
I don't grieve exactly the same as my husband. He has the dad's grief. I have the mom's grief. And when we recognize that, we're going to be so much more gracious with each other. We're going to be so much more willing to give each other space. You know what? Some people start with anger, especially around suicide.
Yeah.
There can be, one of the reactions of survivors often is anger. Like,
and even anger at the person
that's
who
what I
killed
mean.
himself.
Anger at the person. Like, how could you leave me?
Yeah.
You left me. How could you leave me?
How could you do that?
How could you do that? How could you leave our children? How could you leave us as your... There can be a lot of anger. Well, anger is one of the normal emotions in grief. And some people can access the anger more than they can access the sadness or the sorrow. But over time, we experience all sorts of different emotions. We want grief to be linear. You know, first you feel this, then you feel this, then you feel this, and it's just like step 1, step 2. Grief is messy.
Yeah.
Grief is messy, and it doesn't cooperate with those lines. So just even understanding that each person is going to be feeling something different on any given day will allow you to not be torn apart in your relationship as you grieve.
And you know, I feel very strongly that there's a lot of people watching right now that losing someone to suicide has not been their problem, but this is their answer too, that we we have the privilege of not only being resurrected after death, but of living a resurrection life.
Yes.
I love what the Apostle Paul said. His determined purpose is to know him and the power of his resurrection, which lifts me out from among the dead even while I'm in the body.
Amen.
So I've had a resurrection from sexual child abuse. I've had a resurrection from a bad marriage when I was 18. I've had a resurrection from breast cancer. You know, no matter what you're going through, Christ is the resurrection, and he does resurrect us out of it. That doesn't mean it's not painful.
Oh.
It doesn't mean that there's not grief.
That's right.
But God is a redeemer and a restorer, and he makes all things new again.
I love that.
So.
Ezekiel, the other couple other verses, Ezekiel 36 and 37 and 38, where it just talks verse after verse after verse. God says, I will rebuild, I will restore,
right.
I will rebuild, I will restore. And I am counting on God to do that. In many ways, it has felt like my life was ruined by Matthew's death. But God is not helpless in those ruins. He is still working out his plan of love. He is a rebuilder. He is a restorer. And today, 5.5 years after Matthew died, I can truthfully say I am more a person of hope than I ever have been before.
I wrote a book on hope because it is such a big word in the Bible. And the hope that we have is not like well, yeah, I hope something good happens.
Right.
Peter said we're born again into an ever-living hope.
It cannot perish or
cannot
fade.
perish. It's always ours. Yeah. And hope, basically, the simple definition of hope is a belief and an expectation that something good is going to happen. And so in the worst kind of tragedy and the worst kind of pain, as a believer in Christ, we have the great privilege of believing that he can redeem that and something good can happen again.
I would say to anyone, who's listening, who is maybe feeling like their life is in ruins for whatever reason, something that we learned early on after Matthew died. Life will never be the same. That is true. I'm not the same person I was. Life will never be the same, but it can be good again.
Right.
And I can tell you that slowly, bit by bit, it's true. Life is not the same, but it is becoming good again.
That's good.
You're constantly wondering, what could you have done to keep that from happening?
It was really difficult to not take that blame upon myself of, I talked to him a few weeks before this. Why didn't I know? Why didn't I reach out?
To see your son or any loved one, die, especially in this circumstance, you can't describe it. It's just horrible. It's just horrible. It's something that I've never felt in my life.
It was a classmate of mine. He just felt like he was invisible. People, picked on him because he didn't look or act a certain way.
First thought was, it's my fault because I didn't help him out financially. And then I just laid on the ground and just cried out.
We would have found some way to help you. We're not better without you. We're better with you.
God really had to give me peace to know that I had loved my dad the best way I knew how. And there's nothing I could do more than just love him right where he was.
Eventually, with God's grace and help, it does get better.
I've gone through the worst that can possibly happen, and God's still there. He still loves me, and he got me through it. I feel like I've got a little bit more freedom in my life, knowing and trusting God that I can get through anything with him.
God doesn't waste our hurt, and he doesn't waste our pain.
Hold on to God. Let him be your firm foundation through it, because that's the only way.
Well, today we're talking about suicide and how to deal with that struggle. Dr. Linda Mental is a licensed marriage and family therapist, and she's here to talk about how suicide affects loved ones and how to recover from the pain of losing someone to this crisis. Let's talk for a minute about all the young kids today that are committing suicide, because it's just become
epidemic proportions. Teenagers are just turning to that and turning to it way too quickly as an answer. What do you think's behind all that?
Yeah, I think that has to do with this building of resiliency early on in their lives, where again, if they're not allowed to fail at something, if they're not allowed to, not always have the trophy, even though they didn't maybe win it. Participation trophies don't help people build grit.
Let's explain to people what that is.
Yeah, so what that means is that whatever you do, we're just going to give you a trophy because you showed up.
Because we don't want anybody to
feel bad.
To be the loser.
Right, we don't want you to have to deal with that. But that's a critical skill in life that you have to learn. If you look at, Franklin D. Roosevelt, all these people that have talked about picking yourself up, starting over again, making sure you try harder, you learn from your mistakes and your failures. It's how great inventors invent things, by failing.
Yeah.
And so this message that we've given, and I think it has a lot to do with parents have been helicopter parents, where they've been hovering over their kids, and they're so afraid to allow them to fail. That's one end. Then there is all the stuff that I know you talk about regularly, and that is the whole adversity that a lot of kids are dealing with sexual abuse, with physical abuse, with single families in which they really don't have an attachment with their parent, where they can build this kind of relationship that's going to sustain them, where they don't have coping skills that are taught to them.
Right.
You go into a school, then you've got bullying, you've got social media, which I think is a big part of this. We've got Facebook depression now. We've got all kinds of syndromes around the impact of social media, because kids look at that, they compare their lives, and they say, I don't measure up. I don't look like that. I don't have an ideal life like that. And then they begin to feel bad about themselves, and they begin to think that I'm not worthy, and I don't have any way to get there. So what's the use? I might as well give up.
What are some of the signs that people should watch for?
Yeah, so it's very difficult from a parenting point of view, because it's just almost impossible not to have some kind of guilt, even though there are times when you just absolutely don't see it. You're looking for changes in a child's behavior. You're looking for changes in appetite, in sleep. Talk about feeling down, depressed, sad mood that continues, maybe on and on. Sometimes with teenagers and kids, it looks like irritability and anger rather than just feeling down. You look at their energy levels. They start losing interest in things that they're normally doing, like maybe they were really into their sports team and then suddenly they don't really care anymore.
Right.
Sometimes you'll see them giving away things that are their prized possessions because they're thinking about opting out and making a plan to leave. Certainly if you have teenagers that have access to weapons or guns or any kind of pills that are in the house, that is something that you need to think about as a parent always if you've got someone depressed. But the feelings of worthlessness, hopelessness, appetite changes, all of those things are signs. Whenever there's a change in a child from the child that you know and they start to get more distant, isolating, not talking to you, you need to get in there and talk.
Maybe one thing as parents that we can do is always make sure that we're telling our children their worth and their value.
Yes, and you give them a sense of identity, and you say to them, who are you? We used to say to our kids when they were little, you are a mental. That means you are created by God. You're made in the image of God. You're here for a purpose. He has something incredible for your life. Know the characteristics of who God is, because then it's the truth of God where he's always going to be there for you and help you through that. So instilling that into a child all the way through, no matter what they're going for, make their identity in Christ and make your relationship with them so strong that no matter what, they can come to you when they're in trouble and they'll talk to you.
If you're struggling with suicidal thoughts, please call us. There's an answer for your pain, and you don't have to face this alone. We want to help you discover that life is worth living.
My husband had decided he would rather be with my best girlfriend than me. I was dealing with a lot of rejection.
I was dying on the inside, and so I had to put on a mask because there was just so much pressure to be what everybody thought I was.
The financial pressure was like a solution of how to fix that. I wouldn't have to feel that anymore.
Simple decisions were impossible.
I was really isolated at that time. Nobody was keeping in touch with me, and vice versa.
There's no coming back from going to prison, having a felony, and temporarily leaving your children. So there's no way that I could believe that there was a purpose for me to remain.
For a while, I had been planning my own suicide. I had it planned out to the T.
I remember waking up very briefly, looking at the clock and realizing that I had not been successful.
Even when I had suicide attempts, people in the church would come and visit me, and it was like, you don't even talk about it.
Don't let anybody tell you everybody's got problems, just get over it.
The thing about suicide is you think you hate your life, but you hate the life that you know.
So it was multiple days of thinking the right things. I also had to come clean to my parents so that they knew the depth of my pain. I got counseling, and I just started sharing with people that I trusted.
And so talking to somebody brings all that darkness to the light and allows somebody else to speak into it.
Don't let the enemy play on your pain. And yes, his case may sound convincing, but God has something to say about it too.
Do what the hard thing is to do. Open that word. Let God speak to you.
And there is a light at the end of the tunnel. You know, you may not see it today, but you will see it.
Don't give up.
The pain will stop.
It doesn't last forever. There is a solution, and suicide isn't it.
Just continue to call out the name of Jesus.
Don't give up. Don't quit. Don't do it. Trust God because He has the plan.
Well, I have more coming up today that I believe will encourage anyone struggling with suicidal thoughts. But first, I want to offer you this helpful and free CD, Candid Conversations on Suicide. It contains more of my interviews with Kay Warren and Dr. Linda Mental. It's also available as a digital download. Receive your copy today so you can listen to it anytime you need encouragement. And as a reminder that God has a purpose and a plan for you and your life. I know that there's always a lot of broken-hearted, emotionally wounded people in any gathering of this size. Been rejected, been abused. And see, I want you to know that no matter how wounded you may feel, that you're not junk. And no matter how somebody else may have treated you, you can't base your worth and value on what somebody else says to you or about you or how they treat you. We need to realize that they have a problem. That doesn't mean we have a problem. Don't let people transfer their problems to you. My father sexually abused me, and I grew up thinking there was something wrong with me. And I was probably in my 40s before I realized he had something wrong with him. I mean, I knew what he was doing was wrong, but I felt guilty that he was doing it, and I was an innocent child and couldn't really do anything about it. And you hear the story of the abuse that I went through quite often, and it seems to resonate with a lot of people. But there's another part of my story that I haven't talked about all that much. I mean, I've indicated it, but haven't talked about it much in detail. And I just felt like God wanted me to start sharing it here and there, because sometimes you look at somebody that's got a good, successful life, and you can't imagine that they were ever maybe in worse condition than you might be right now. And so I married the first guy that came along when I was 18, and just was desperate, didn't think anybody would ever want me, so I just took the first chance that I had. And it was just a 5-year nightmare. So here I'd been grown up in this amazingly dysfunctional, abusive home, left home when I was 18, got married when I was 18, 5 more years of just unbelievable, crazy living. He would disappear and be gone for 3 months and then come back and tell me how sorry he was. And of course, you know, desperate people keep doing dumb things. And so I'd believe him over and over and take him back. And when we got married, we'd only been married just a few days, and he took me out to Albuquerque, New Mexico, and he was a car salesman, and he was going to drive a car out there for somebody and get paid to do it and then have a job there selling cars. And so we were there about 30 days, and we lived in a little motel room, and I just sat there by myself all day, and he was rarely ever there. And at the end of 30 days, he just disappeared. And I'm sitting out in Albuquerque, New Mexico by myself at 18 years old. Didn't have any money, didn't have a job. So I called a friend at home, and they sent me $75 for a bus ticket. I went home on the bus, didn't even really have money to eat a proper meal on the way home.
and got home and lived with somebody else. I was always living with other people, always never having any stability. And then I took him back again. And then another time he took me to Oakland, California, same situation. Well, I would just like to tell you before I tell you the rest of the story that I have been back to Albuquerque and had a conference there, and I have been to Oakland, California and had a conference there. I think it's good sometimes to go back to the places where you were hurt and say, I'm back. I'm still here. It didn't kill me. And so I had one miscarriage after we'd been married about, I don't know, 3.5 years, and then I got pregnant again, and he left me and lived with another woman 2 blocks from where he and I lived. So every morning when I would drive to work, I'd drive by where he was living with this woman and just felt like my heart was absolutely breaking. Well, I got to the point where I was 9 months pregnant and had to quit my job, and I carried all my babies late, and so at that point I had nowhere to live. I didn't have a job, and so my hairdresser took me in, and I lived with her and her mother until the baby was born. And then when I was in the hospital, had the baby, he showed up. Baby looked just like him, so he's like, I'm so sorry, me. And so he picked me up to take me home from the hospital, and when we walked out of the hospital, we had nowhere to go. So basically, in essence, although I never lived on the street, I'm telling you that at one time in my life, I was homeless. And I just think it's good to tell you this because I want to tell you what, you can recover from anything. There is nothing that you cannot recover from. And I'm not guessing about that, I know that. You see, I know that the Word of God works, and that no matter how people have treated you, God has got a good plan for your life. And so here's what you need to do. Stop hating them and start loving God more and more and more, and He'll bring restoration in your life. Amen? So let's just pray again for the people in here that are really wounded and hurting inside, and we're going to pray for God to do a real work in you. Father, I pray for all the people here tonight that have been mistreated, that have been hurt and wounded. And we know, Lord, that there are places in us that only you can get to. Nobody else can do it. There's not a pill that's going to fix it. There may be some things that will numb it, but nothing is going to fix it. Drugs are not going to fix it. Alcohol is not going to fix it. Immoral relationships is not going to fix it. Only you can fix what's wrong with us. You created us, God. You recreated us in Christ Jesus, and you want to give us a new life. So I pray that your healing power, Jesus, you are the healer of the brokenhearted. I pray that your healing power would seep down into people's souls beginning tonight and even over the next few days, and bring a restoration to them, beginning with letting them know how valuable they are and how much you love them. In Jesus' name, be healed. Amen.
We hope you have enjoyed today's program. Please contact us or visit joycemeyer.org to share your prayer requests, see the conference schedule, or partner with us in sharing Christ and loving people all across the globe. This program has been made possible by the friends and partners of Joyce Meyer Ministries.